Now take a slow, deliberate moment to dim the lights in your room, till the walls are bathed in a soft amber glow, or perhaps a deep, quiet blue. If you have a fan nearby, turn it on now, allowing its steady, mechanical hum to become a constant, gentle anchor for your senses. This ritual of preparation is not merely about the physical space around you, but about the sacred space within you. We are collectively stepping away from the frantic, artificial light of the digital screen and the heavy, exhausting weight of the day's many demands. In this sanctuary of sound, you are finally free from the world's expectation. In this space, you have my absolute, unreserved permission to stop listening whenever your mind feels the gentle pull of the shadow. There is no requirement, no obligation to hear the end of this story, for its primary purpose is not to inform your intellect, but to cradle your spirit. We have intentionally sought out the slow, the steady, and even the slightly mundane details of the long-forgotten past to help you find your natural way toward rest. Sometimes, history can be too vivid, too intense for sleep. But tonight, we have carefully crafted these passages to be a bit boring for a bedtime or soft, gray tapestry of words designed specifically for your peace. The simple truth of our journey tonight is that sometimes history is best served as a lullaby, not a lecture. Think of time not as a series of dates or battles, but as a vast rhythmic ocean that has been washing over the shore of human existence for thousands of years. Tonight, you are not a student of the past. You are simply a traveler drifting upon its calm, dark surface. There is nothing for you to solve here, no names you must memorize, no dates you need to recall, and absolutely nowhere else you need to be. Take a deep, slow breath now, feeling the cool air enter your lungs and the warm, tired air leave your body. As you exhale, perhaps tell us where you are watching from and what time the clock shows in your corner of the world right now. There is a strange, communal comfort in knowing that while you prepare for sleep, others across the vast globe are sharing this exact same moment of profound stillness with you. You are part of a silent gathering, all seeking the same refuge in the stories of old. The thatched roofs of the medieval villages are now dark and silent against the midnight sky. The heavy stone walls of the monastery gardens are cooling in the damp night air, and the noise of the modern world has finally completely faded into the distance. This leaves only the soft, rhythmic rustle of the wind moving through the ancient, overgrown hedges. We are now truly ready to begin our walk together through the forgotten fields of Europe, where the earth holds its treasures in a deep, silent, and eternal embrace. Let us turn our attention now to the quiet soil of the medieval world, where a pale and tender secret has been waiting for centuries to be noticed once more. It is a root of subtle charm, characterized by its tangled roots and a natural, nutty sweetness, a staple of a lost era that once whispered in the gardens of humble monks and powerful kings alike. We begin our harvest of silence with Skirret, the sweet, pale root of the forgotten field. Tonight, we are moving away from the noise of the world. We are not looking at golden crowns or the clash of steel, but at a silent, breathing world hidden just beneath your feet. Close your eyes and breathe in the scent of damp, ancient earth, a place where history didn't happen in palaces, but in the quiet dark of the soil. It is a still, heavy world, once filled with flavors and textures that have since been erased from our modern memory. These are the vegetables that were once the lifeblood of the medieval farmer, blended with rough, calloused hands and simple iron tools. They were not harvested for bright supermarkets or global trade, but for the bubbling stews in stone hearths and the humble bowls of healing pottage that kept the darkness of the Middle Ages at bay. Imagine a time when the rhythm of life was measured not by a clock, but by the slow swelling of a root in the cold ground. These are the forgotten flavors of the medieval world vegetables. Though hardy, they stood as the only barrier between a family and the winter famine. They were the lifeblood of the silent monk and the tired farmer, harvested not for profit, but for the warmth of a stone hearth and a bowl of healing pottage. Most of these names have been erased from time, yet tonight they return to offer you their quiet strength. From the bitter green surf to weary nights recovering from their wounds, to root vegetables so incredibly resilient they fed entire villages through the biting frost. These crops were once essential to human survival, a fundamental part of the landscape, and yet today we have forgotten how to speak their names. They have become ghosts in the garden, shadows in the cellar, waiting for a moment of absolute stillness to be remembered once more. In this garden of the mind, time does not move with the frantic pace of the digital world. It moves with the slow, rhythmic turning of the season. These vegetables were more than just food. To the peasant and the monk alike, they were as vital and as sacred as bread itself. They represented a deep, unbreakable connection to the land, a total dependency on the cycles of the moon and the arrival of the rain. There is a profound peace in this dependency, a realization that the earth continues its work, regardless of the chaos above. It offers a kind of quiet, dependable sanctuary before you get too comfortable in this quiet space. Take a moment to settle into your surroundings. If you find peace in these journeys through the past, perhaps you might consider joining our community, but only if our stories truly bring you the rest you seek. We would love to know where you are listening from tonight, and what time the clock shows in your corner of the world. Sometimes our stories are perhaps a little too interesting for sleep, but tonight we have intentionally sought the slow, the steady, and even the slightly mundane to help you find your way toward rest. Imagine the silence of a walled garden at dusk, where the only sound is the distant call of a bird or the soft rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. The soil here is heavy and dark, holding the secrets of centuries within its embrace. As you visualize this garden, feel the tension leaving your shoulders, letting the weight of your day sink into the mattress beneath you, much like a seed settling into the ground for the winter. Take a final moment to adjust your pillows, dim the lights until the room is bathed in a soft, amber glow, and perhaps turn on a fan to create a steady, gentle hum of background noise. We are about to step away from the noise of the present. We are leaving the lights of the city and the glow of the screen behind to walk among the forgotten fields. Before we dig deeper into the soil to uncover these ancient treasures, let us prepare our own internal space for the night, ensuring that your mind is as calm and as ready as the garden waiting for the spring. The air is cooling, the stars are beginning to appear over the thatched roofs, and the first of our forgotten roots is waiting to be rediscovered. It is a pale, sweet thing, hidden in the monastic gardens of old Europe, and it goes by the ancient name of Skirret. Long before the rugged earth-stained potato ever graced the European continent, there was a quiet, pale root that claimed the hearts of farmers and monks alike. This was Skirret, the sweet root of forgotten fields, a name that is barely whispered in the busy modern world, but was once as common in the cottage plots of the Middle Ages as the humble onion or the dependable leek. Imagine, if you will, a time when the gardens of medieval Europe were filled not with the heavy, starchy crops we know today, but with these slender, clustered roots, pale and tender, waiting patiently beneath the damp, dark soil of a silent monastic kitchen garden. Skirret, known formally to the botanists of old as Sium scissorum, was a vegetable prized not for an imposing size, but for its subtle, lingering charm. Unlike the modern carrot, which pushes a single thick orange taproot deep into the earth, the skirret formed a delicate and tangled cluster of slender roots, each about the thickness of a wooden pencil. These roots were startlingly white and clean once washed, possessed of a naturally sweet and nutty flavor that felt like a rare gift from the land itself. In the quiet, high-walled kitchens of ancient monasteries, where every flavor had to be coaxed directly from the local soil rather than purchased from far-off merchants, Skirret was a celebrated and reliable staple. The preparation of this root was a slow, rhythmic ritual that mirrored the pace of the life around it. The roots were carefully peeled, a task requiring patience and steady hands, then boiled or roasted until their white flesh became soft and yielding. Often, they were mashed with a heavy wooden pestle into a kind of creamy, peppery pasta dish that carried a depth of flavor somewhere between the earthiness of a winter parsnip and the bright artichoke-like sweetness of a sunshine. This mild sweetness paired perfectly with the sharp bite of garden garlic, the warmth of stored onions, and the fresh aromatic herbs plucked from the very same garden bed. In the wealthiest of households, Skirret was even treated with the reverence of a rare dessert, candied carefully like a fruit, or baked into savory tarts alongside rich, fatty cheeses and fresh eggs. Despite its delicate flavor, Skirret was a plant of incredible resilience and quiet strength. It thrived in the damp, heavy soils of northern climates, and demanded very little in return from who tended it, because it was a perennial, meaning it returned to life year after blissful year, was a loyal and permanent companion to the cottage garden. For the medieval peasant, Skirret was more than just a simple meal, it was a dependable promise. It could be harvested well into the deep heart of winter, dug up with a rusted spade from the frozen, unyielding ground, when every other green crop had long since withered and died away. In many ways, it was the perfect survivor's crop, a secret source of sweetness hidden beneath the bitter snow of the hard season. Yet, this humble root was never confined merely to the tables of the poor. It graced the wooden plates of the highest nobility, appearing in rural garden entries and the meticulous, handwritten records of manor houses and abbeys. It is said that even the royal gardener, King Henry VIII, tended to these delicate white roots in the palace bed, ensuring the monarch had a steady supply of their sweet, nutty flesh for his banquet. Beyond the kitchen, Skirret was held in high regard by the village apothecaries and monastic herbalists, who praised it for its medicinal qualities, believing it to be a powerful aid for the digestion and a gentle remedy for the spirit. As you visualize these tangled, pencil-thin roots being pulled from the cool, dark earth, feel yourself sinking deeper into a state of absolute and heavy rest. Imagine the white steam rising in slow curls from a stone bowl of mashed Skirret, the faint scent of wood smoke drifting from the hearth, and the absolute, profound silence of a winter evening in a time long past. There is no rush here, no noise, and no worry. The world is slow. The harvest is safely gathered, and the earth is at peace beneath its blanket of frost. But the history of the garden is one of constant, quiet change and inevitable display. In the 16th century, a new arrival from distant lands began to cast a long, dark shadow over the traditional vegetable beds of Europe. The potato, larger, easier to grow in massive bulk, far higher in the calories needed for a growing population. The potato slowly and systematically pushed the delicate Skirret to the forgotten margins of the field. The need for careful peeling and the slender, fragile nature of its roots made Skirret seem inconvenient in an industrializing age that was beginning to favor mass cultivation over garden craft. Slowly, the sweet root was replaced, its seeds were left unsown, and its ancient name was quietly forgotten by the busy generations that followed. Yet, beneath the ancient hedges and along the edges of the wild wood, the memory of the garden remained. As the sweet, pale Skirret fades back into the soft shadows of history, another green ally waits just outside the heavy cottage door, clinging stubbornly to the stone walls and offering a different kind of quiet nourishment. This is the story of a plant that reigned as a king of the wild edges, a faithful companion to the stone-walled cottage. The forgotten green, known as Good King Henry. In the long drifting shadows cast by ancient stone cottages and along the untended, quiet edges of medieval fields, a humble monarch once reigned over the wild knot with a golden crown, a heavy scepter, or a throne of cold marble, but with a vibrant living crown of dark green, triangular leaves. This was Good King Henry, a plant that stood as a faithful, silent, and ever-present companion to the medieval peasant, growing stubbornly and gracefully where little else would dare to take root, while the great lords and high ladies of the manor favored exotic, costly imports from distant lands. The common folk turned their eyes to this perennial green, finding in its tender spring shoots a nourishment that was as vital, as honest, and as dependable as their daily bread. Today, few recognize the name, and fewer still can spot it growing in the cracks of history. But in the prime of the Middle Ages, good King Henry was an essential thread in the very fabric of human survival. Imagine, if you can, a plant that demands almost nothing from the world, and yet gives so much in return. Good King Henry was a low-maintenance ally in a world where survival was a grueling, full-time labor. Once it found a home near a damp stable, along a crumbling garden fence, or tucked against the lime-washed walls of a cottage, it would return year after year without a single complaint, thriving even in poor, neglected soil. Its dark leaves offered a deep green sustenance that arrived early in the season, often being among the very first fresh foods available to a hungry family after the long, bleak, and gray misery of a northern winter. There is a profound sense of relief in seeing those first green tips break through the cold mud, a sign that the earth is waking up once more. There is a quiet, lingering mystery in its name that speaks deeply to its humble and protective character. While it sounds like a formal tribute to a seated royalty, the name Henry likely has nothing to do with a king on a throne. Instead, many scholars believe it originates from Old Germanic roots, meaning home ruler, a beautiful and evocative reference to its incredible closeness to the house. It was a plant that stayed near the home, guarding the family against the gnawing ache of hunger with its persistent and dependable nature. To the villagers and the tired laborers, it was affectionately known as poor man's asparagus, a title that reflected its value as a prized delicacy for those who lived far from the refinements and the luxuries of the royal court. In the dim, smoke-filled kitchen of a rustic cottage, where the only light came from the hearth and a few small windows, the preparation of good King Henry was a simple, comforting art. In the early misty days of spring, the young shoots were carefully harvested by hand and boiled until they became soft, succulent, and slightly bitter. Later, as the sun climbed higher in the sky and the days grew longer, the large triangular leaves were picked and cooked just like spinach, often stirred slowly into thick, steaming pottages, earthy lentil stews, or baked into heavy rustic pies made of coarse grain. Though its flavor was not delicate or refined by modern standards, it was rich in the iron and the essential vitamins needed by hard-working farmers, providing a much-needed boost of energy for those who spent their long days tilling the heavy, unyielding earth. Beyond the bubbling cooking pot, this home ruler proved its worth in every dark corner of medieval life. Its seeds were ground for medicine to heal the sick. Its roots were sometimes dried and stored for the lean months of famine, and even the ash from its burned leaves found a humble purpose in the early traditional craft of soap-making. It was a plant of absolute quiet utility, a symbol of an era where every living thing was respected for the warmth and the strength it could provide to a family in need. As you visualize the rough, earthy texture of those dark green leaves being stirred into a steaming wooden pot over an open, crackling hearth, let a sense of profound stability and ancient safety settle over you. Imagine the feeling of the worn wooden floor beneath your feet, and the rhythmic, metallic sound of the heavy iron pot lid clinking softly as the stew simmers. The world outside the cottage walls is vast, unpredictable, and often cold, but inside, by the warmth of the hearth where the good King Henry is being prepared, there is a deep sense of belonging and peace. Feel the reliability of a plant that never leaves its post of green guardian, that waits patiently by the heavy oak door, returning with the warmth of the sun every spring without fail. In this memory, there is no anxiety for the future, no fear of scarcity, and no noise from the outside world. The home ruler is present, the small garden is secure, and the stone cottage is warm against the encroaching night. The plant does not ask for your constant attention or your praise. It simply exists, growing in the cracks of the stone, offering itself to those who know where to look and how to live. It is a quiet form of love, written in the language of the soil and the rhythm of the season. You can almost feel the cool, slightly fuzzy texture of the leaves between your fingers. as you help harvest the morning's meal and in the soft light of dawn. But as the turning centuries moved forward and agriculture became more controlled, commercialized and standardized, the rough, wild edges of good King Henry began to seem outdated and coarse to the modern eye. Cultivated spinach and refined, store-bought asparagus began to take its honored place in the gardens of the elite, and the slow germination and bitter, honest notes of the old green ally fell slowly out of favor. It was quietly and gently pushed back to the wild hedges and the forgotten walls, becoming a silent green memory of a much humbler time, when survival was a shared ritual between humans and the earth. Yet history teaches us that even the strongest and most faithful kings must eventually fade into the deep frost, making way for the mysteries that thrive only in the silence of midwinter. As we leave the protection of the cottage wall behind, the air grows sharper, and the ground begins to crunch softly beneath our feet. We move across the frozen fields toward a route that carries the faint, ghostly essence of the ocean within the cold, hardened soil, a peculiar and tender winter delicacy known to the ancients as the salsa. Among the frost-hardened beds of the medieval kitchen garden, where the dark earth is crusted with a delicate shimmering layer of silver iron, there grew a root with a truly peculiar and captivating reputation. This was salsify, a long, slender, and tapering root, often known to the garden as old as the oyster. Though this humble vegetable never felt the salt spray or heard the crashing waves of the distant sea, and its only home was the deep, still silence of the inland soil, its creamy white flesh was said to hold a taste that was faintly, almost ghostily, reminiscent of fresh oysters, especially when simmered slowly in a pot of warm milk. To our modern ears, such a sensory comparison might sound curious or even suspect, but in a world that existed long before mass refrigeration or global food import, salsify was a prized winter delicacy that brought a much-needed touch of the exotic to the long, gray month. This slender root, protected by a tough, slightly hairy, and weathered skin, thrived in the cooler northern climates and the poorer stone-filled soils where other, more delicate plants would surely wither and die. It was planted in the early, hopeful days of spring and left to grow with an almost agonizing slowness. Through the heavy heat of the summer and the cooling rains of autumn, by the time the harsh, unforgiving winter finally rolled in, its flavor had not faded into the cold. Instead, it had deepened, concentrated and sweetened, becoming most potent and complex only after the arrival of the first true biting frost. For the medieval farmer, the silver frost was far from a threat to be feared. It was actually a welcome signal from the heavens. It told the watchful eye that the salsify was finally ready to be harvested tender, resilient, and brimming with its hidden subterranean essence. For the patient and weary medieval cook, preparing salsify was a labor of quiet, almost meditative dedication. The roots had to be scrubbed thoroughly with coarse brushes to remove the stubborn, frozen earth, then carefully peeled and immediately soaked in bowls of clear, cold water to prevent their pale, ivory flesh from discoloring in the winter air. Once prepared with this level of meticulous care, they could be boiled slowly over a low hearth, stewed in heavy iron pots, or mashed into a silky consistency, much like parsnips, often used as a secret thickening ingredient to add body to the soups and stews of the grand manor house. The texture was remarkably soft, satisfying, and almost velvety upon the tongue, a subtle, sophisticated complexity that stood in stark contrast to the otherwise bland and repetitive fare of a long, isolated winter. Beyond its culinary appeal, salsify held a deeply respected place in the sacred and mysterious world of herbal medicine. The ancient monastic herbals, painstakingly written by flickering candlelight in the silent scriptoriums of Europe, described this root as a powerful and divine remedy for a wide array of human ailments. It was used to treat everything from the physical danger of snake bites and liver troubles to the heavy, crushing emotional burden then known as melancholy. Its thick, milky sap was thought by the monks to possess wholly purifying properties, a liquid essence that could cleanse both the body and the weary spirit alike. Even the long leaves, though not as commonly sought for the master's dinner table, were never wasted. They served as a vital, life-saving food source for livestock when all other forage was buried beneath the leanest weeks of winter snow. Despite its undeniable value and its medicinal mystery, salsify remained a somewhat niche and exclusive vegetable, never quite reaching the widespread, everyday popularity of the common turnip or the omnipresent nut. It was a plant of the smaller, more refined patches frequently found in the carefully tended garden attached to grand monasteries or the productive, walled estates of manor houses. Its labor-intensive nature, requiring so much unhurried patience in the field and so much vigorous scrubbing in the kitchen, made it less than ideal for the mass cultivation that would come to define the industrial ages. And so, when newer, healthier, and more predictable vegetables like the potato arrived to claim the vast fields of Europe, salsify was gently and quietly pushed to the forgotten fringes of agriculture. Today you might still find this oyster of the garden, tucked away in the back of specialized heirloom seed catalogs, or growing quietly in the corners of heritage gardens. But few truly remember its once vital and aromatic place in the rhythm of medieval life. Yet, for the generations that have long since gone to their eternal rest, salsify brought a necessary touch of refinement and a hidden oceanic sweetness to the roughest, coldest winters. It remains a quiet, subterranean reminder that even in the hardest and most unyielding seasons of our lives, nature offers something tender, something sophisticated, and something deeply nourishing, if only you are willing to dig slowly and deeply for it. As you visualize that silky white root being boiled in a heavy pot of fresh, steaming milk, releasing its delicate, salty aroma into the cool air of a stone kitchen, let the warmth of the image settle over your weary limbs. There is a profound and healing depth in this winter silence, a feeling of being shielded and protected from the world's noise by the heavy, frozen earth above, just as the biting frost is the very thing that brings the final, necessary sweetness to the root. So too does the profound stillness of this night bring a much-needed, sacred silence to the world around. We move now from the salt-tinged secrets of the winter root to an ancient herb that once dominated the kitchen counters of history, long before the rise of parsley or celery, the tall, hollow, and peppery giant known to the ancients as Alexanders, long before the familiar pale stalks of modern celery or the ubiquitous sprigs of parsley dominated our kitchen counters and garden beds. The medieval farmer turned to a towering, resilient plant called Alexanders, with its tall, hollow stalks that could reach nearly 6 feet in height, and its deep, glossy green leaves. Alexanders was once a shimmering star of the medieval herb garden. It grew with a wild, commanding presence along the dusty roadside, in the cooling shadow of monastery walls, and beside the heavy weathered stone of castle gates. As familiar to the people of that time as sage or thyme are to us today, this was a plant of ancient strength, originally introduced to the soil of Britain by the Roman legion, who considered Smyrnium olusatrum an essential companion for any cook's garden and a necessary flavor for the long road of empire. To understand the true, life-saving importance of Alexanders, one must imagine the hungry gap, those bleak, early weeks of spring, when the winter's stores of grain and dried meat had run dangerously low. Yet the summer harvests were still many months away. In this fragile, quiet time of year, when the earth was just beginning to stir from its long slumber, Alexanders offered a reliable and essential burst of fresh green. It was a plant of remarkable endurance, possessing a unique ability to thrive in the salty, harsh coastal soils where other, more delicate crops struggled to survive. This made it especially precious to the monastic communities living near the crashing waves of the sea, where self-sufficiency was not just a virtue, but a daily necessity for survival. In the bustling, steam-filled kitchens of the Middle Ages, Alexanders was truly the Swiss Army knife of cooking a plant, where absolutely every part was put to use with grateful and weary hands. The tender young leaves added a spicy, aromatic, and peppery punch to heavy stews. The thick, sturdy stems were carefully blanched and eaten like asparagus. The pungent, dark seeds were gathered and ground as a bold seasoning, and even the sturdy roots were unearthed from the sandy soil and roasted as a hearty, satisfying vegetable. Its flavor was bold and slightly bitter, appreciated for a strength that our modern, refined palates have largely forgotten. In an era where exotic, far-off spices like cinnamon, nutmeg, and black pepper were incredibly expensive imports reserved only for the tables of the wealthy, Alexander's provided the common folk with a much-needed aromatic punch to brighten their simple, daily meal. As you visualize this green giant standing tall and unmoving against the cool coastal mist, let a sense of its ancient endurance wash over your body. Imagine the deep, earthy scent of its crushed leaves, peppery, bold and resonant, drifting through a drafty stone kitchen like a ghost of garden's path. There is a profound, grounding comfort in the reliability of such a plant, one that returns faithfully to the hedge and the cliffside, signaling to the world that winter's gray grip is finally, mercifully breaking. It is a sign of spring, a burst of living green after the long, monochromatic months of bitter cold. Feel the tension leaving your mind as you picture the monastery garden at dawn, the air filled with the scent of wild herbs and the distant sound of the tide. Yet even a plant as versatile and strong as Alexander's eventually found itself pushed aside by the relentless march of time. With the rise of cultivated, milder celery, which offered a softer flavor and was far easier for the modern gardener to control, the aggressive, self-seeding Alexanders began to fade slowly from daily use. It was left to the wild, retreating to the coastal cliffs and the forgotten hedgerows where it still grows today, a living, breathing memory of a time when every plant in the garden had to be a warrior. It remains a testament to a world where flavor was found in the strength of the soil and where survival was etched into every tall, hollow stalk. As the peppery, bold scent of Alexander's lingers in the cool evening air, we turn our focused attention away from the towering stalks of the garden's edge and look down once more toward the dark, protective, and silent embrace of the earth. Embrace of the earth. For while some plants announced their presence with height and leafy vigor, other roots chose to hide their true beauty and their healing power beneath a rough, dark, and bark-like skin. A subterranean treasure known to the medieval world as Scorzonera. Take a final deep breath of the spring air and let the soil receive your thought. In the quiet, twilight hours of the medieval garden, where the shadows of the stone walls stretched long across the damp earth, there grew a vegetable of striking and mysterious contrast, a root that seemed to mirror the very nature of a hidden seed. This was Scorzonera, a plant that hid its true, radiant essence beneath a rough, dark, and bark-like skin. To the wandering eye of the uninitiated traveler, it looked wild, unrefined, and perhaps even a bit formidable, earning it the descriptive name Scorzonera from the old Italian words, meaning black bark. But those who knew the ancient secrets of the soil understood that this gnarled, dark exterior was merely a protective cloak, a shield against the world. Once the dark skin was carefully and patiently peeled away, it revealed a surprisingly delicate, creamy white flesh inside, a golden heart tucked deep beneath the earth like a treasure waiting for the patient. Steady hand to find it. The reputation of Scorzonera extended far beyond the simple nourishment of the body. It was a root steeped in the deep lore of protection and healing. In an age of deep shadows and unknown dangers, it was widely known as the viper's herb, for many believed its potent, milky juices could serve as a miraculous antidote to the bite of a venomous snake. In the hushed, aromatic rooms of the village apothecaries and the cool, stone-walled infirmaries of the great monasteries, these roots were dried and ground into fine, healing powders. These sacred preparations were prescribed not only for physical venom, but as a shield against the terrors of the plague and the heavy, lingering grayness of melancholy. It was seen as a plant of hope, a subterranean guardian that people trusted to draw the toxins from both the weary flesh and the troubled spirit alike. In the flickering heat of the medieval kitchen, scorzonera was treated with a level of culinary respect that matched its medicinal fame. While it may have looked rough and uninviting when first pulled from the dark ground, once prepared with care, it transformed into something smoother than a carrot, and sweeter than a winter parsnip. It possessed a soft, buttery, and almost nutty flavor that made it incredibly flexible in the skilled hands of a monastic cook. In the grand noble households, where flavor was a sign of status and wealth, scorzonera was not merely boiled. It was celebrated. It might be baked into intricate savory pies, or layered into rich roasted vegetable dishes to accompany a meal of fish or meat. Most intriguingly, some medieval chefs would pair the root with the brightness of vinegar and the liquid gold of honey, a careful combination designed to enhance the root's naturally sweet and delicate undertone, turning a humble root into a feast for the soul. For the medieval farmer, scorzonera was a crop of slow, steady dependability, a quiet companion through the turning years. It was a plant that asked for very little attention once it had established its home in the cool northern soil, growing quietly and steadily through the changing seasons. However, the harvest required a gentle and mindful touch. Its roots were long and incredibly fragile, buried deep within the dark protective earth. They could easily snap if the gardener was too hurried, too forceful, or too distracted with the spade. There is a profound rhythmic lesson in this harvester reminder that the most valuable things in life often require us to slow down our breathing, to be fully present in the moment, and to move with a sense of careful, loving intention. As you visualize the slow act of digging deep into the cool, damp earth to find this hidden root, let a sense of profound protection wrap around you like a heavy, warm cloak. Imagine the feeling of the dark soil between your fingers and the quiet, deep satisfaction of revealing the ivory white heart, hidden so effectively beneath the black bark. There's no danger here in this garden of the mind, only the absolute safety of the soil and steady ancient rhythm of the season. Like the scorzonera, you are protected, you are grounded, and you are safe within the embrace of the still night. Feel the tension leaving your limbs as you realize that even the roughest, darkest exterior can hold something soft, sweet, and golden within. As the centuries march forward, the rise of higher yield crops like the modern standardized carrot and the ever-present potato eventually pushed the scorzonera to the forgotten edges of the field. Its tough, bark-like exterior and the painstaking care required for its peeling made it too inconvenient for the frantic, hurried pace of the modern world. But in the Middle Ages, this root was more than just sustenance. It was medicine, it was hope, and it was warmth in a cold, hard season. It remains testament to the idea that we must often look beneath the surface to find the true value of a thing, that all it asks of us is that we dig just a little bit deeper into the silence. But as we leave the dark skin and golden heart of the scorzonera behind, we move toward a different kind of mystery in the medieval orchard. For while some treasures are found by digging deep into the dark earth, others require a different kind of patience altogether, a patience that waits for time itself to complete its work. We turn our eyes upward now toward a strange wrinkled fruit that challenges our understanding of beauty and time of fruit that cannot be enjoyed when it is fresh, but must undergo a slow, controlled transformation in the straw. This is the story of the medlar, the fruit that had to rot before it could truly be found. Strange, wrinkled, and curiously soft to the touch. The medlar is perhaps one of the most misunderstood and enigmatic fruits ever grown in the high-walled orchards of medieval Europe. It resembled a small, weathered brown apple with an open, star-shaped bottom. A peculiar and distinctive appearance that often earned it crude, earthy nicknames in Old English text. But far beyond its odd, almost unsightly exterior was a fruit that held a cherished and highly respected place in medieval cuisine. in the broader culture, and in the very philosophy of the shifting season. While other fruits of the summer were celebrated for their bright, vibrant colors and their immediate easy sweetness, the meddler asked for something much deeper and more profound from those who tended it. It asked for the sacred art of total surrender to the passage of time. Unlike almost any other fruit known to the garden or the forest, the medlar was not edible or welcoming when it was first plucked from the heavy branch. If you were to bite into its firm flesh in the crisp days of autumn, it would be hard, bitter, and entirely unyielding to the senses. Instead, it had to undergo a mysterious, slow, and transformative process called letting a kind of control. Graceful and necessary rot that occurred only after the harvest was gathered. The fruit was collected in the late autumn, long after the bright apples and the juicy pears were gone from the tree, and it was stored away in quiet, dark beds of dry straw or placed patiently on wooden windowsills until it softened to the core. Only then, as the skin turned dark and the flesh became a pulpy, spiced paste, did it transform into something truly magnificent. It became rich and deeply flavored, reminiscent of a complex spiced applesauce with a subtle, lingering, and sophisticated touch of wine. In the high-walled kitchens and the stone-floored cellars of the Middle Ages, the meddler was a cherished reward for those who understood the immense value of patience. Once the long bleeding process was finally complete, the fruit could be eaten simply with a small spoon, scooped straight from its soft, yielding skin. It was a rare and precious winter treat, a sudden burst of concentrated sweetness available when almost every other fresh fruit had long since vanished from the cellar and the larder. Medieval cooks used this dark, rich paste to create elegant jellies, sauces, and festive tarts, often pairing the mashed fruit with thick, fresh cream, honeyed wine, or rich, salty cheeses. In the wealthiest of manor houses, medlar preserves were served alongside roasted meats at grand winter feasts, providing a sophisticated and necessary balance to the heavy, savory flavors of the cold season. However, the medlar was never just a simple culinary ingredient. It held a profound and resonant symbolic meaning that moved through the art and the literature of the entire era. Poets, scholars, and playwrights used the fruit as a powerful and moving metaphor for the human condition, for the inevitable process of aging, for the hidden sweetness found only in maturity, and for the beauty that only reveals itself through the long work of time and decay. Even the great William Shakespeare mentioned the medlar more than once in his enduring plays, often using it with a gentle wink of earthy, ribald humor that reflected its common, familiar standing in the English countryside. It was, in many ways, a perfect and ultimate medieval symbol, humble and perhaps even ugly in its first appearance, slow to mature and ripe, but full of an incredible spice depth for those few who treated it with the proper care, time, and respect. As you visualize these small brown fruits resting quietly and undisturbed in their warm beds of golden straw, let a sense of absolute and total acceptance wash over your entire body. There is a deep, quiet, and ancient wisdom in the meddler's slow journey. It teaches us that decay is not an end to be feared, but a gentle transition, a necessary and beautiful softening that allows the true, hidden essence to finally emerge. In this way, the meddler serves as a perfect and soothing metaphor for the very act of falling asleep. Just as the fruit must let go of its hardness and its resistance to become sweet, you are now letting go of the rigid, heavy thoughts of the day, allowing your busy mind to soften, to yield, and to dissolve into the spiced. Dark and comforting warmth of deep breath. There is no need to hurry this process, like the meddler resting on the sun-warmed windowsill. You are simply waiting for time to do its quiet, inevitable work. Patience in the medieval world was seen as a high virtue of the soul. The meddler rewarded that virtue with a unique sweetness that could not be found anywhere else in the natural world. It is a quiet, soft reminder that beauty doesn't always look perfect at the first glance, and that the most profound and lasting rewards often come only to those who are willing to wait in the complete stillness of the night. As the fading light of the manor orchard disappears into the cold winter mist, feel the heavy weight of your body sinking deeper and deeper into the mattress, becoming as heavy and as content as a ripened, softened fruit. You are safe in the hands of time, and there is nothing left for you to do now but simply be. As the centuries pass and new, more convenient and brightly colored fruits like oranges, peaches, and bananas reach the European markets from distant shores, the medlar slowly and sadly lost its place at the table. Its requirement for ripening after the harvest made it unfashionable and forgotten in an age that demanded immediate, fast gratification. But, in its golden day, the medlar was a fruit of deep and silent contemplation, reminding the people of the Middle Ages that even in the coldest months of life, and even in the very process of fading, there is a richness and a depth to be found if one is willing to wait. From the orderly, stone-walled orchards of the great manor houses, we move now away from the cultivated rows and toward the wild, more mysterious and legendary corners of medieval folklore. We leave behind the fruit of patience to find a plant that grew behind every humble, thatched cottage, a small, resilient root that fed the body during the leanest years and fueled the vivid imagination of storytellers for many generations to come. This is the story of Rampion, the gentle, white-rooted plant that stands at the very heart of a world-famous fairy tale. In the quiet, forgotten corners of medieval herb gardens and the modest plots beside the old, thatched cottage wall, a humble plant once grew that bridged the gap between simple daily sustenance and ancient, shimmering folklore. This was Rampion, a resilient and entirely edible biennial herb that flourished in ordinary garden soil without the need for rich compost or meticulous tending. To the peasant families and monastic gardeners of the Middle Ages, Rampion was a precious and reliable gift from the earth, a versatile plant that offered nutritious, spinach-like greens in the soft light of spring and crisp, slender white roots in the late, cooling autumn. While it has largely vanished from our modern plates, its memory is preserved forever in the soft, glowing light of our most cherished bedtime stories. Imagine the profound simplicity of a medieval meal where Rampion was the star of the table. Its young, tender leaves were gathered by hand in the morning mist and stirred into steaming pots of vegetable pottage or eaten raw, seasoned only with a pinch of coarse salt and a splash of sharp vinegar. As the year turned toward the first silver frost, the slender white roots were pulled from the cooling earth drift, tender and mildly sweet, possessing a delicate, aromatic flavor that sat somewhere between a fresh radish and a sweet parsnip. For families with very little land and even less money, this was a plant of true survival, helping to bridge the hungry gap when winter stores were nearly exhausted and the first spring crops were still months away from the harvest. The most enchanting and enduring secret of this plant, however, lies not in its flavor, but in its very name. For many people today, Rampion or Campanula rapunculus is most familiar as the namesake of Rapunzel, the girl with the golden hair from the famous fairy tale. In the early Germanic versions of the story, it was a pregnant woman's intense, uncontrollable craving for the fresh green rampion growing in a witch's forbidden garden that set the entire legendary chain of events in motion. This deep association with yearning, patience, and secret desire reflects how the people of the Middle Ages regarded their humble vegetables. They were not merely items of food, but powerful, mysterious forces of nature, capable of influencing the very threads of fate itself. As you visualize the delicate purple, bell-shaped flowers of the rampion swaying gently in a medieval breeze, let your mind drift into a state of whimsical, airy calm. Feel the lightness of the story as it weaves through the moonlit garden, connecting the practical act of gardening with the magical, starlit world of the human imagination. This was a plant of both hunger and healing, a quiet green life that fed the tired body by day and fueled the vivid dreams of children by night. There is no heaviness here in this space, only the soft, rhythmic rustle of leaves, and the gentle, hypnotic pull of a story that has been told for 1,000 years across flickering hearth. Imagine the woman standing by the high stone wall of the witch's garden, gazing at the lush green leaves of the rampion, feeling that strange and magical pull of the earth. In that moment, the plant was more than a vegetable. It was a symbol of all the things we yearn for in the silence of the night. This root, though small and hidden, carried the weight of dreams and the promise of something extraordinary. As you settle deeper into your rest, let that same sense of quiet magic wash over you, a feeling that even in the simplest parts of nature, there is a legendary beauty waiting to be recognized. As the long centuries passed, Rampion was slowly and inevitably overshadowed by faster-growing crops and greens that were easier to harvest and eventually fading into the soft shadows of history and the dusty pages of storybooks. But once it grew behind every humble cottage, a silent witness to the daily life, the simple struggles, and the enduring bedtime stories of a world long gone. It remains a gentle reminder that even the most ordinary root, tucked away in the soil, can hold the seeds of a legend within its heart. Now, as the echoes of the fairy tale begin to dim and the air grows slightly cooler and more fragrant with the sharp, clean scent of salt, we leave the cottage garden behind. We move away from the soft inland soil and travel toward the rugged, windswept edges of the medieval world where the dark earth meets the endless, rhythmic hum of the sea. We go now to find a vegetable that thrives in the salt and the mist, a hardy and magnificent survivor of the rocky shorelines, known to the ancients as sea kale. In the windswept coastal villages of medieval Europe, perched precariously along the jagged and rocky edges, where the salt spray and the restless gray sea ruled the land, a most curious and resilient plant took root. This was sea kale, a magnificent and sturdy survivor that thrived in the very places where other crops would surely wither and perish under the harsh, saline breath of the northern earth, long before it ever found a protected home in the inland kitchen gardens of the wealthy. Sea kale was a treasure foraged by the steady, weathered hands of coastal farmers and foragers who saw in its hardy, bluish-green form both essential nourishment and a rare seasonal novel. Imagine the shoreline at the first light of dawn, where the air is thick with a heavy, cool mist and the rhythmic low thrum of the tide provides the only constant soundtrack to the morning. Here, among the wet gray stones and the shifting sandy banks, the thick, ruffled leaves of the sea kale emerged like a silent, green gift from the depth. Its flavor was a sophisticated and earthy bridge between the familiar world of the cottage garden and the wild, untamed essence of the coast, a taste described as something nestled perfectly between the hardiness of cabbage and the delicate, nut-like refinement of asparagus. It was a plant that required no tilling of the soil and no planting of seeds, only the immense patience to wait for the sea to offer up its abundance to those who knew where to look. The most prized and celebrated part of this coastal sentinel is not the mature, tough leaves, but the tender, emerging shoots of the early spring. To ensure these shoots remained as delicate, as pale, and as sweet as possible, medieval foragers employed an ancient technique of quiet protection. They would blanch the growing stems under heavy, overturned clay pots or deep mounds of sea sand to keep them shielded from the awakening light. When finally uncovered, these ivory-colored stems emerged, crisp, succulent, and beautifully pale lace dark, ghostly contrast to the rugged, dark landscape from which they grew. For the isolated fishing communities of the Middle Ages, the arrival of these tender shoots was a moment of profound spiritual significance. It was a living signal that the earth was finally warming. The winter was retreating into the shadows, and the sea was beginning to calm its long winter fury. In the quiet stone-walled kitchens of the remote coastal monasteries, sea kale was prepared with a humble simplicity that honored its rugged, salt-born origin. The blanched shoots were gently steamed or boiled in heavy iron pots, often served alongside a fresh catch from the morning's cold nets, or simply mixed with a generous bit of churned butter and wild, aromatic herbs. Even the long, thick, and edible roots of the plant were harvested with care, serving as a sturdy source of food or being boiled into cleansing medicinal tonics by the monastic herbalists who studied the plant's resilient, life-giving properties. It was a vegetable of deep, seasonal rhythm, a quiet delicacy that appeared exactly when the humor needed it most, providing a sudden burst of fresh green vitality after a long, dark winter of dried beans and stored root. As you visualize the vast gray expanse of the medieval coastline, let the cool, salt-tinged air of the great ocean fill your senses and settle into your lungs. Imagine the sound of the waves breaking slowly, heavily and rhythmically against the jagged cliffs, a constant hypnotic hum that effectively drowns out the noise and the frantic hurry of the modern world. There is a deep, isolating, and healing peace in this landscape, a profound feeling of being at the very edge of the world, where the only thing that truly matters is the steady pulse of the tide and the slow, inevitable growth of the kale among the silent rock. Feel every remaining bit of tension in your weary body dissolving into the coastal mist, your breath slowing down to match the eternal rise and fall of the distant starlit sea. You are entirely safe here, tucked away in the stone shelter of the cliffs, far beyond the reach of worry, haste, or demand. The sea kale does not demand the farmer's constant toil or anxious intervention. It grows in its own quiet time, nourished by the salt, the sand, and the spray, a testament to the quiet abundance that nature offers even in the most rugged and unforgiving of places. As the stars begin to flicker one by one over the dark, moving water, and the coastal villages settle into their nightly, well-earned rest, let yourself drift into that same state of unmoving, starlit peace. The earth is still beneath you. The ocean is a vast and ancient cradle, and you are finally, completely at rest. But as the cool, damp mist of the rocky shoreline begins to fade slowly from your mind, a different kind of warmth begins to stir from deep within the protected garden soil. For while the sea kale offered a pale, delicate beauty to the spring, other roots held a fierce, sharp, and hidden fire within their white flesh, a fire capable of waking the sluggish senses and healing the spirit after a long, cold hibernation. We move now away from the salt of the shore to the pungent, powerful, and fiery heart of the medieval herb garden to find the unmistakable root of ancient feasts and fiery remedies. The horseradish, beneath the damp, profoundly quiet soil of the medieval herb garden, where the long shadows of the centuries linger in the cool earth, we find the final hidden treasures of our journey. Horseradish and fat hen, one a fierce and pungent protector, the other a wild, generous, and humble gift of the open field. Horseradish, with its thick, aggressive, and deep-reaching roots, was never a subtle presence in the garden. It was a root of true, unyielding fire, capable of clearing the senses, waking the sluggish spirit, and transforming a simple rustic meal into a bold and warming feast. It was deeply respected by the ancient monks and herbalists as a powerful medicine, a rugged plant that reminded every farmer that the earth itself could fight back with a sharp, cleansing, and necessary strength. Beside it, growing quietly in the disturbed soil, flourished the humble, fat, henna wild green that modern, hurried hands might pull as a mere weed, but which the medieval family cherished as the people's. It was a free, abundant, and highly nutritious offering from the landscape, a plant that fed the poor and supplemented the leanness of harvest when the cultivated greens were scarce or failed entirely. The fat hen required no tools, no seeds, and no ownership of land. It was a testament to a time when not every blessing came with a price, and nature's generosity was always near for those who knew its shimmer in the sun. In this sacred, endless cycle of growth and decay, even the lowliest and most overlooked parts of the garden held a divine promise of life. Acting as a vital, leafy bridge between the shifting seasons, we look up now from the dark, cold soil to the vibrant, green leafy crowns of the turnip, those resilient tops that were so often overlooked by history, yet served as the first true signal of spring's renewal in the early, misty weeks of the year. These turnip greens were a burst of fresh color and vital nutrition, a necessary feast for hungry mouths when the winter stores had finally run dry, and the fields were still mostly bare and gray. They remind us that in the medieval world, absolutely nothing was ever truly wasted. Every leaf, every stalk, and every hidden root had a purpose, a story, and a vital place in the great, slow, and rhythmic movement of existence. As you settle now into the final, deepest, and most heavy layer of your rest, consider the beautiful and quiet reveal of these forgotten, that the seeds of history still remain patiently beneath our feet, tucked away in the warm darkness of the soil, waiting only for a little light and a little time to grow once more. These ancient flavors, these sacred medicines, and these storied plants are not truly gone or lost to time. They are merely sleeping, resting in the same profound and healing stillness that is now beginning to pull at your own weary mind. There is a deep, grounding, and eternal comfort in this continuity, the knowledge that the earth remembers everything it has ever grown, and that you, in this moment of absolute quiet, are now part of that same eternal, peaceful cycle of memory and deep restorative rest. In the medieval garden at the stroke of midnight, there is no noise, no hurry, and no unfinished labor. Everything eventually returns to the fertile soil, finding its way back to the quiet, protective, and warm embrace of the earth. Let the heavy, comforting weight of the past, the whispered stories of the monks, the coastal foragers, and the silent, hard-working farmers carry you softly and safely into the dreams of the future. You have walked through the forgotten fields. You have harvested the silence of the soil. And now the garden is secure, the stone cottage is dark, and the hearth fire has finally dimmed to a soft, glowing amber. If you have found a sanctuary of peace in these ancient shadows tonight, know that this garden will always be here for you, tucked away in the folds of time, waiting for your return whenever the modern world grows too loud or too bright. But for now, there is only the vast darkness, the clean scent of the cooling earth, and the rhythmic, slow, and hypnotic breath of the night. The stories have faded into the coastal mist, leaving you alone in the sanctuary of absolute and sacred stillness. Let go of the day, let go of the light, and allow yourself to sink, finally, into the deep, spiced, and eternal warmth of a sleep that has been thousands of years in the making. Everything is at peace. The earth is still. Sleep now, sleep.